immense mental trauma, immense emotional trauma, immense physical trauma, and the war both killed him physically and mentally.
Right, and and I agree wholeheartedly. And I think part of this, it has to do with the scale of the war. I think that when you have World War One, where you have just countries going at it with each other in an ideological battle, versus the Gulf War, which was rather quick, you're going to have different impacts on the individual soldier. I think also the different types of combat. Mr. Powell explained he was not really a full frontal boots on the ground soldier. He was more about patrol. And if you compare that to Paul, who was right there on the front in all the action in the trenches, actually, it's very, very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I noticed was what the soldiers valued. So I think that what Mr. Powell was getting at he was saying how what they valued, it kind of tied into how they spent time writing their loved ones, and how when he got back from the war, he just loved being around loved ones. He said it multiple times how he just relaxed with family. I think that while in the book we see the soldiers kind of detaching themselves from these relationships, how you have, yes, they're very close comrades, but like Mueller, when his comrade dies, Kemmerich, I'm sorry, I'm probably brutalizing that name, but when he dies, he thinks about his boots, and yes, he feels something for his comrade, but it's not really about that. It's more about the materialistic thing. And I think it was a lot different from when Mr. Powell was in war. I think that there's a huge contrast in how their personalities are and to what depth they're broken down from the war. And actually, in contrast, Mr. Powell was not broken down at all. In fact, if anything, he was lifted up.
Mm-hmm. And also, he mentioned that everyone he knew also didn't come out with really any trauma. If anything, they also probably came out as better people for it, too.
So if you were to just your short abbreviated list to put together all the things that you think were kind of different, well, what do you think are the key things that were different between their experiences?
I would say the key difference was just that Paul came out of World War One. Well, he didn't even come out of it. That's also another difference. But he was destroyed. He was destroyed physically and mentally, while Troy, he came out as a better person. I would say that's really the biggest difference, and a very, very stark difference.
Right. And on a final note, just to add on to that, I want to say that I think his experience for me kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there are different experiences to war. And after reading this book, after reading All Quiet on the Western Front, you shouldn't generalize all war experiences to be mass atrocities or to be extremely bad. And finally, that they were put through a different machine. It was a different kind of machine, one that cranked out a better man in Mr. Powell's case, but one that completely tore down generations of people in Paul's case.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for today. We hope to see you again on our next edition of the Scholar and STEMite podcast.
Yes. And hopefully next time we'll get some science up in here, but
I hate my job sometimes.
All right, everybody. See you next week when things are a little bit more fun.
Have a good night.